All right, so today we're going to get into this really interesting theory. It's all about the psychology behind modern protests. And it all kicks off with this pretty wild scene on the streets of Minneapolis. We've got these two commentators who use this one incident to build this kind of provocative argument. They call it narcissistic heroism. So let's just dive right into the moment that started it all.
Okay, so this is it. This is the moment everything pivots on. You've got federal agents, they're physically pulling a woman out of her car. And for the political commentators we're looking at, this isn't just some random street scuffle. Nope. For them, this is the key. This is what they believe unlocks a whole theory about what's really driving some of this activism we see.
So here's the game plan for breaking this down. We'll start with the confrontation itself. Then we'll get into what the speakers say about the language being used. After that, we'll hit their main theory, this narcissistic hero idea. We'll see how they go after the media coverage, and then we'll wrap up with the challenge they throw out to all of us. All right, first things first. To really get this theory, you have to get what happened in this specific incident. I mean, their entire argument is built on this one tense moment. A civilian versus agents from ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, on a street in Minneapolis. So, according to the commentators, here's how it went down. The whole thing apparently started when a woman used her car to block an ICE operation. The speakers say that she wouldn't get out of the car, and, well, that's when the agents had to break a window to get her out. And right at this moment, as they're carrying her away, she starts yelling out a bunch of things. Claims about her health, why she's there. And these statements, this is what the commentators really grab onto. This is the fuel for their whole argument. Okay, so that incident becomes the launch pad for the commentators' first big point. And it's all about rhetoric, the words people use. They basically argue that a confrontation like this doesn't just happen. It's not in a vacuum. They say it's fueled by some really specific, really historically loaded language. And here's commentator Carolla spelling it out. He basically says, look, if you start calling these agents Nazis, well, what does that make you? The French resistance, right? And suddenly, resisting them, even getting physical, isn't just a protest anymore. It's framed as this incredibly heroic act. You can really see their logic laid out here. They're arguing that when you hear language like jackbooted thugs, it's not just an insult. In their view, it's a green light, a justification for physical action. The whole narrative shifts, right? It goes from being about civil disagreement to something that feels more like a righteous war. And in that war, the protesters get to be the heroes. And that right there, that leads us to the absolute core of their entire commentary. The speakers are suggesting that the real motivation here might not even be political. They think it's about something deeper, a psychological need to feel like a hero. So what is narcissistic heroism? Well, according to them, it's this desire to wear the hero's cape, but without taking on any of the real risk. It's like a performance of bravery. They say it's about getting all the credit for standing up to this big bad force, but in a situation where you're not actually in any real danger. The host, Megyn, she jumps on this idea and kind of paints this psychological picture. She suggests it all comes from a place of, personal frustration, this need to feel powerful. And she even compares it to cosplaying, like you're just dressing up and playing the part of a soldier. So then they start asking, okay, why is this happening now? And they point to a few cultural things they think are driving it. First, they say there's a lack of real-world events that call for old-school heroism. Then there's this need to paint your opponents as these almost comic book supervillains. And finally, they see it as a way for people to feel important, especially in what they call an age of no religion. Okay, so let's circle back to that incident in Minneapolis, because the commentators use it as their Exhibit A for how they think the media operates. They argue that news outlets take these events and just mold them to fit a prepackaged narrative. And they say it's this predictable cycle every single time. Here's how they lay it out. Step 1, something happens and it's immediately reported with a biased one-sided spin. Step 2, later on, the real story, or at least conflicting details, start to come out. But by then, they argue it's too late. The news outlet loses a bit of credibility, but then, step 4, the cycle just starts all over again with the next big story. And here is where they really try to make their case. You see the headlines from different publications on one side, and then you see the commentators' counterpoints on the other. So while the headlines were saying things like, ICE terrorizes another woman, or she was just trying to get to the doctor, the commentators push back. They point out she's a known activist, a social justice trainer, and that the alleged reason for the arrest was for assaulting an officer.
So, all of this, the incident, the rhetoric, the media critique, it's all building to their final point. And it's a direct challenge, but it's not aimed at the media or the protesters. It's aimed squarely at the people watching and reading all of this, the audience.
And Adam Carolla's final directive, well, it's pretty blunt. He's basically telling his audience to stop getting swept up in what he sees as purely emotional stories, and instead just use some basic logic when you're looking at the news.
Yeah, their whole closing argument is an appeal to what they call common sense. They basically say, think about it. Is it really plausible that a federal agency is just randomly snatching people off the street? They argue that would be a total PR disaster, so it's just impossible. And because of that, they conclude there just has to be more to the story.
And, that really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? On the one hand, you have the commentators' version of events. On the other, you have the headlines they're pointing to. So when you're faced with these two completely conflicting stories, how do you figure out what's real? How can any of us effectively sort through the noise to find the truth?